and then planning for a better future. That would look very different in your situation with Karis than it would in a marriage situation where there's been years of unhealthy. Oh, this is a repeat. My mic.
You like this one,
Producer
though?
Chris, can you turn my mic up? My mic feels very light. I don't know what's like to our listeners, but in my, there we go.
Listen to this.
This,
That's the part you wanted to get to.
yeah. This is a repeat.
Yes, this is the one where you
I really
knew
like
that
this one.
drop
I
when
hit
it dropped.
yeah. This is a good one. Well, hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of our On Purpose Parents podcast. Kurt Johnston, Grace Yoon,
Hello, hello.
the always faithful, always professional, hint, hint, hint,
Always
producer
creative.
Chris,
Well, hello, everybody.
over in the corner where he belongs. And thanks for listening. Thanks for joining us. This is episode 2 of our 3-episode series on building a harmonious home. Very lofty goal.
Yeah.
Very lofty goal. And just to recap, if you didn't listen to episode 1, please do. But just to recap, there is no such thing as a perfectly harmonious home.
That's right.
We have seasons of harmony, and then the wheels
Many
fall.
more, many more moments.
Grace's eyes got huge. She's living.
There's seasons of harmony.
But that's what we're going to tackle today. And we're just going to jump right into it. We're going to tackle, like, what do we do? Last episode, we talked about some things to kind of maybe try to keep the temperature down.
Reduce the drama.
Reduce the drama, maybe reduce the odds a little bit of things getting a little bit crazy. The reality is things get crazy.
Yep.
Stuff happens. The wheels fall off the cart. Things happen. Things get said. And then there's the aftermath, right? And as parents, we've all been there. Every single one of us has been there where it just goes off. It just gets off and it elevates and escalates. And then we lay in bed or we take a walk or whatever it is. And we think, what in the world? And as a parent, how did I let it get to that point? And now what do I do? And now what, right? And so today we're going to talk a little bit. And Grace, because you're right, you and Sam are right smack dab in the middle of it. Rachel and I, our kids have been out of the house for 3 or 4 years now. So we've been empty nesters for a while. I've got tons of stories of when it went wrong. But because you're smack dab in the middle of it, I'm going to let you kind of lead this conversation. I might chime in. Producer Chris might chime in. But for the most part, we're going to let you just kind of work us through as a in the trenches right now today parent. What do we do in the aftermath of a massively disharmonious moment?
Oh,
family?
massively disharmonious. Look at that. Yeah. Thanks, Kurt. I really am excited about today's topic because I think when, as parents, we can get that question right most of the time. Again, we're not perfect. It can be a game changer. And so today what I want to focus on is this concept of the cycle that we will go through over and over and over again as parents with our kids of rupture and repair.
Okay.
Rupture and repair. That's constantly happening in relationships. It's getting ruptured. And then what I want to emphasize is more than the rupture or the conflict, the importance and the profound impact of repair. So first, what is a rupture when we're talking about it? And really, it's a rupture when you look at like some of the research out there. It's anything that is a breakdown in our connection with another person. It's a roadblock. Most of the time we view it as like a conflict. And that'll be mostly like the context for today, but not always. There could be other ways a connection in a relationship can get ruptured outside of your own control conflict. There's other issues, but today we're mostly focusing on the conflict piece. So case in point, an example of rupture that we tend as parents to focus on the most is, like this past week, or was it a week and a half ago, I was driving home from Karis's and Zoe's basketball game, and Karis's team played hard, but they lost 3 to like 37.
Oh, gosh.
So, but
I mean, I don't want to be. I don't want to be like. I don't want to be sexist. But first of all,
it's
3 sounds much more likely than 37
Yeah.
in sixth
In
grade
kid, yeah,
girls
yeah.
basketball.
No, it's co-ed team.
Oh, it's a co-ed team?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Co-ed team. So both
3.
sides co-eds. Yeah, 3.
3.
Yeah. So we're driving home, and the thing is, like, Sam and me, like, we just want them to get started in sports. So, like, it didn't really bother me, right? So, like, I'm not at that stage yet where it's like, oh my gosh, like, you have to win. It's more just like, oh, do you even like basketball? That's exciting.
Right.
But we're going home, and so I'm just like kind of more in a happy mood, wanting to have a conversation of like, yeah, like that other team was kind of intense. Like they actually had plays, and you could tell like moves.
Right.
And then Sam had done a couple like fun coaching sessions because he plays basketball with the girls. And then Karis was like, yeah, well, if only you guys like taught us better or something, right? And I flipped a lid. Like, I think because I was so busy that day, I was running around, I was like figuring out like car rides. There's so much going on at work, so much. And my reaction was just like, it was like one of those things where you're like really, it's not a lecture. It was like I was yelling. I was yelling all the way home.
But you went from 0 to 60.
I did. I went boom. I was like that was like an instantaneous trigger. And I think all of like it was like I was saying stuff like, yeah, I do all this stuff, all the things you don't want to say that you'd be embarrassed to say out loud. Like I do all, like, you know, you're not grateful and blah, 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 blah. And so basically it's like the car is silent and I'm like yelling and then we get home. Okay. So there we go. We set up the picture. Yeah. There was a rupture.
Right.
Now, most parents, we would stop there. And
in your defense.
Yeah.
In your defense. 3 points.
Yeah.
3 points.
That's not even trying.
In your defense, Grace.
Well, later I found out that was in Karis's defense, right? It was context for her because I was happy about it, but she was feeling super insecure about that. But anyway, that's the rupture. And now most of the time, and you set this up, Kurt, as parents, we would be like, afterwards, several emotions we might be feeling as a parent, like, I'm annoyed, or I said a lot of stuff that I don't really feel great about.
Right.
But at the same time, I feel prideful. I don't, like, what do we do? So that's the question. Yep. At that point, when you hit that rupture, what do you do next? And instead of just focusing on, like, I can't believe she said that. I can't believe I said that. Like, and we get stuck there and we may react differently. Like, let's just wait till the emotions die down and ignore it.
Right.
Never come back to it. Because, when we're feeling better, we're fine. We just move on. Or, what do we do? That's the question. When this rupture happens, what is actually next? Where should our focus be?
Yeah. Well, and before you jump into that, my mind goes back to last week where we said, expect ruptures. Mm-hmm. We didn't use that language last week, but expect conflict. Yeah. Expect it. And if we're not careful, we almost become desensitized to it. So, of course, our family always bickers. Mom always loses her temper. We're always sarcastic. And then we don't deal with it. We don't repair because, hey, no family's perfect. Yeah. And so we just kind of live in the unhealthy resolution or the lack of resolution. And to your point, when you cool down, it's a half hour later. If I bring it back up, now I'm just inviting the conflict back into right. We're all past it now. Why bring it up and allow tempers to rise again, which sounds logical but isn't the healthy way?
Yes.
So you're going to talk to us about the healthy way. Okay.
That's right. That's so true. And then we have all these patterns in our family then where we have ruptures.
Right.
And then that's it.
Right.
You just have a rupture and then a kind of some sort of thing that pacifies it and allows you to move on.
Right.
But what I will say is the most powerful thing next is really not the rupture, but the repair that could happen afterwards. And sometimes, like some psychologists will say that repair, that practice of repair, what it does for relationships is so powerful that they will actually deem the rupture the negative thing that happened as a positive thing, because it creates opportunities for repair to happen. There is a neuropsychiatrist, Dan Siegel. He's the director of Mindsight Institute, and he's author of several books on interpersonal neurobiology. And he has a quote saying, repairing ruptures is the most essential thing in parenting. So for him, he's hunkering down on this thing called repair. So first, before I go into what is repair, I will say, if you're a parent like me that have these moments where you just go from 0 to 60 and you say a bunch of stuff and you elevate the temperature, you can be kind to yourself because you're actually creating an environment where something wonderful could happen. So a little nugget of encouragement there.
Yes.
So what is repair? One point that I want to make is, first, repair is not just saying sorry. And this is funny because Sam and I have talked about this in our marriage relationship. If you just say sorry, sometimes that is a vehicle to just shut down conversation. I'm sorry.
Right.
Why do you have to keep talking about it? I'm sorry. Can we just move on now?
Right.
Sorry. I said, I'm sorry. But repair is not just that. I mean, the word sorry may be part of repair, but repair is actually going back to that place where the rift happened and spending a little bit of time there and leaning into that. So it's not like, and it's also not like, well, let's go back to it. I'm sorry, Karis, that I kind of flipped a lid. But if you weren't such a selfish kid,
Smart Alec.
I wouldn't have been
You
mad.
weren't so sassy.
Right.
You weren't so sassy.
If you didn't do X, Y, Z,
Right.
well, then I wouldn't have
Right.
behaved in this
Right.
way. And that's not what we mean by repair or like a healthy way of modeling, because now you're putting the onus on your child for your own behavior, regardless of whatever their behaviors are. They don't own your behavior, and
Right.
we should not as parents put the responsibility of our reactions on them, regardless of how they're acting. So then what is repair? And I want to just suggest 3 things, but really it could look like a lot of different things. But just for today's conversation, just 3 things. Name what happened, take responsibility, and plan for a better future. So the first part, naming what happened, really could be multiple different steps. But ultimately, the goal of this is both a space where both sides can share what they experience from their perspective, where both sides are listening to each other, and then validating the other person's perspective. Whether you fully agree with it or not, it's just creating that space. So it could involve terminology and words like, did I help you? Did I hurt you? Can you help me understand how? That could
Right.
welcome a conversation. Each side could say things that express how they felt, like, I felt not listened to, or I felt sad, or I felt unloved, I felt worried, I felt overwhelmed, I felt misrepresented, I felt overlooked, right? So it's giving a side to express that. And then part of this kind of understanding what happened is really validating the other person's experience. So some words you could say here is, I can understand how you felt that way. Or when I raised my voice, that made you feel attacked or taken for granted. Is that right? So again, there's so much there, but the point is creating a space, a safe space where we can really understand and validate what the other side perspective was. And then the second part of the 3 things is taking responsibility. And that could look like saying, Karis, I've been overwhelmed at work and I've been running on empty. This has made me stressed and irritable. And I reacted to you in a way that I didn't want to. And it's not fair to you and it's not your fault.
Right.
I'm sorry for how I reacted and how I yelled and how I criticized you. And then the last part of that is like planning for the future. Maybe you could discuss one thing that might help make the issue better next time. So in this case, I could say, Karis, I'm going to try really hard next time to take a deep breath when something upsets me and try to not react by yelling. And so again, this is a very simplified script. This type of script where you understand the other person's perspective or identify what happened, take responsibility, plan for the future. This could be a very long conversation,
Right.
or it could be quick like that,
Yep.
like a quick 1 minute thing.
Yep.
as a cycle of repair.
Yep. And I would suggest the stronger the rupture or the more consequential the rupture, then the longer and more in-depth those 3 steps should be.
Right.
Right. So your situation with Karis where you lost your temper, probably not a real elongated, right? Because now if it was an ongoing thing and right, and then you might say, wow, we've never addressed this, but I'm realizing I always lose my temper in these moments, that then those repair steps might take a little bit longer. But so it's almost like measure the rupture.
Yes.
And then you can determine how deep and how intense these steps of naming what happened, owning responsibility, and then planning for a better future. That would look very different in your situation with Karis than it would in a marriage situation where there's been years of unhealthy dialogue.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
And then they might have to go back and say, wow, over the last 10 years, here's what's happened.
We really have to unpack this rift.
But the steps of name what happened, own your responsibility, own your part in it,
Yes.
right? And then kind of what might a better future look like
Yes.
is such a quote unquote easy
Yeah.
way to address like when it goes wrong.
Right.
How do what do we do? How do we bounce back from that?
Right, exactly. And I would suggest that if we think to do this in these things that seem small,
Right.
it actually creates this pattern and habit in your family where maybe you can avoid some of these deeper,
Right.
more intense ruptures that just never get dealt with over time and just get masked.
Yeah, that's good.
So even if it's like a small little thing, like as a parent, you can model that. Like last night I did that. It wasn't as big of a blow up as post basketball, but it was a small one. And I just was like, oh, good night, huffed off. I'm having a lot of these interactions with Karis. But then I went back into a room and I just did this thinking about the podcast. I just said,
Right.
Karis, I know you're just trying to do what's responsible for you. And I just was getting impatient because it was late. Next time I'll, work. It was like 30 seconds.
Right.
But you could just see she like reached out and hugged me. We just like squeezed each other's hands. She was going to bed and that was it. That was
Yeah.
great. That was
Right.
over. It could be something very simple like that too.
It's great.
Yeah.
Am I interrupting? Keep
No,
going.
no, you go. Go
well,
for it.
I don't know if we're wrapping up. Are we
I
wrapping up?
have one last thing to say. Yeah.
Well, you go ahead.
Okay. So then my last point on this is going to be just an encouragement about how powerful this act of repair is. And my encouragement here is that when you engage in repair, you are actually changing history. You are in the work of changing the past. So in counseling and therapy, there is some thought about how memory is the original event plus all of the other times you've thought about the event. So it's not just the event itself, it's the combination of the event plus thinking about the event. And so if the event is negative and you think about it, when you remember it, it's negative, it's just that cumulative negative effect in your life and experience that you've had. Whereas repair allows you to insert and replace all that negativity that's created by rupture, blame, defensiveness, annoyance, isolation, depression, guilt. It allows you to actually change that story. So when you go back and we have a repair, there was a rupture, negative, but we apply repair to it. When you go back and think about it, yes, the original rupture is negative, but you also have now associated with it a very positive memory, and it's tied to all the positive emotions that come with repair: understanding, empathy, responsibility, care, support, hope. And that is an incredibly powerful and hopeful thing. It's not, the hope isn't that you never have a rupture. The hope is you can have a repair that changes the negative sting and impact of that rupture on someone's life. So just to close out, Becky Kennedy, this woman did a TED Talk, and her TED Talk topic was the single most important parenting strategy. And her that's the title of it. And she talks about repair. And to close out her quote, one of her points is that it is never too late to do repair on a rupture. And so it's such a message of hope. And here's what she said. She says, how do I know it's never too late? And she says, well, imagine right after this that you get a call from one of your parents. And if neither of your parents are alive, imagine finding and opening a letter you hadn't seen till that moment. And then she says, okay, walk through this with me. And here's the call. She says, hey, this is the parent speaking now.
Right.
Hey, I know this sounds out of the blue, but I've been thinking a lot about your childhood. And I think there were a lot of moments that felt really bad to you. And you are right to feel that way. Those moments weren't your fault. There were times when I was struggling, and if I could have gone back, I would have stepped aside. I would have calmed myself down and then found you to help you with whatever you were struggling with. I'm sorry. And if you're ever willing to talk to me about any of those moments, I'll listen. I won't listen to have a rebuttal. I'll listen to understand. I'll love you. I love you. And her point was, how many people listening to that would be like,
I'd love to get that call. Right.
I don't care. It'd be like, no,
Not
like,
everybody.
oh my gosh. Like that power of repair is, as parents that we have, so powerful. And it's a message of hope that don't get stuck on the rupture and beat yourself about it. Is use that as an opportunity to lean into repair and the incredible power that it has in changing your relationships
That's
for the
awesome.
good.
That's so good. And I want to speak real quick to those in the audience who are Jesus followers and Christians. It's not a matter of scripture versus counseling and psychology, because a lot of what you were referencing, Grace, is from the psychiatric and the world of therapy. And oftentimes as Christians, we're like, well, wait a second, but the scripture says, just as you've been forgiven, forgive. And there's a verse in Colossians that kind of says, you need to forgive as quickly as God forgave you, right? The golden rule, just do unto others as you would want done unto yourself. That's a Bible verse. The Bible doesn't call it the golden rule. We gave it that label. There's a lot about our Christian faith that can cause us to sort of not feel the need to also recognize the power of sort of more psychologically based strategies. Of course, we should quickly forgive. But if you just forgive and walk away and don't address or reflect or do the repair work, the forgiveness is still real. The power of forgiveness is always real. You're just more likely to find yourself in a pattern of constantly having to forgive each other. And constantly having to forgive each other. And
Or not reconciling.
Or not reconciling.
It's just an isolated
right?
thing.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure that the Christian parents listening don't think that we don't recognize or we're avoiding Scripture speaks to every topic, every subject we face. Maybe not specifically directly, but there's principles. And when it comes to parenting, Scripture speaks to all aspects of parenting, and we recognize that. And a big part of following Jesus is when you first start talking about rupture and repair, that's the gospel.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's the gospel. Our relationship with Christ was ruptured. Our relationship with God was ruptured because of our sin. Through the work of the cross, that's been repaired. Like this the whole idea of rupture and repair is just rooted in. And so, yeah, we can very quickly go, you know what? You hurt me, I forgive you, as a Jesus follower. Fair enough. That's in fact, I would say that's step one. Step one is I need to really quickly forgive you for that rupture. And now you know what? Let's identify what went wrong.
Right.
Let's own our part in it.
Right.
Let's talk about a brighter future so that we don't just get in this never-ending cycle of I hurt you, but you forgive me because you love Jesus.
Right.
And I hurt you, but you forgive me because I'm not perfect.
Right.
It's not either or. It's both and.
Right. And sometimes it could be, not all the time, but sometimes it may open our eyes to the fact that that quick I forgive you might be false peace.
Yeah.
That you think that that's what you're supposed to say, but it's not accurate representing what's really going inside of you, which is, I don't think, what that exhortation to forgive really meant.
Right.
It's not to have fake platitudes.
Right.
It's to have an authentic, real relationship
Yeah.
that is meaningful and helps us to grow in
Yep.
true connection.
Yeah, it's awesome. Well, everybody, producer Chris is totally quiet
I know.
because Grace was just spitting fire today. She's just spitting.
I was
dimes.
mesmerized. It
Yeah.
was amazing.
Well, thanks for
Love
joining
it.
us. If you didn't listen to episode 1, please do that. This was episode 2, and we'll see you in about a week with episode 3 of Building a
That's right.
Harmonious Home.
All right. Bye, everybody.